"Mom's asleep. Take everything from the fridge." I heard my son Kevin's voice somewhere in my dreams, but I couldn't wake up. My body wouldn't let me. I was too exhausted after 12 hours of caring for Mrs. Patterson at the nursing home. She'd been restless all night, calling out for her daughter who never visits, and I'd spent most of my shift holding her hand, telling her everything would be okay. I didn't know that while I was lost in that heavy, dreamless sleep, my daughter-in-law Nicole was filling 4 enormous bags with everything from my refrigerator. The nice cuts of meat I had bought with money I couldn't really afford to spend. The imported cheeses my coworker Patty had brought me from her vacation in Wisconsin. The bottles of wine I'd been saving for the holidays, some of them gifts from birthdays past. Everything. Absolutely everything. And the worst part? My own son was helping her. When I woke up at 4 in the afternoon, the winter sun was streaming harshly through my bedroom window. My body felt shattered, like someone had taken it apart during the night and put it back together wrong. Every bone ached. My knees throbbed with that familiar fire that never quite goes away anymore. My lower back felt like it had been twisted into a knot. At 69 years old, these night shifts are killing me. I know that. My doctor knows that. But my Social Security check doesn't cover everything, and the nursing home pays well for overnight care. So I keep going, one shift at a time, telling myself I'll retire soon. Next year, maybe. Or the year after. I sat up slowly, feeling every one of my years in the creaking of my joints. My mouth was dry as sandpaper, and my hands trembled slightly. I needed food. I needed tea. I needed to feel human again. The house was strangely silent as I put on my slippers and shuffled down the hall. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the heavy kind. The kind that makes your skin crawl without knowing why. The door to Kevin and Nicole's room was open. The bed was unmade, their things scattered everywhere as always. Clothes on the floor, makeup containers on the dresser, a wet towel thrown over the chair. I'd stopped saying anything about the mess months ago. It wasn't worth the eye rolls from Nicole or the uncomfortable silence from my son. I made my way to the kitchen, thinking about nothing more complicated than a cup of Earl Grey and maybe some toast with that nice strawberry jam I'd bought last week. My stomach was growling, that deep, hollow kind of hunger that makes your hands shake and your head feel light. I hadn't eaten since before my shift started, almost 20 hours ago. I opened the refrigerator, and the world stopped. Empty. Completely, absolutely, impossibly empty. It wasn't just a few things missing. They hadn't just eaten the leftovers or finished the milk. The refrigerator was empty as if someone had moved out and cleaned it before leaving. The shelves were shining, spotless, without a single item on them. Not a yogurt cup, not an egg, not even a bottle of water. My legs started to tremble, and I had to grab the door frame to keep from falling. I thought I was losing my mind. Maybe the exhaustion was playing tricks on me. Maybe I was still dreaming, trapped in some strange nightmare where my food had vanished into thin air. I opened the freezer. Empty too. The 5 pounds of beef I had bought 3 days ago was gone. The whole chicken I'd been planning to roast on Sunday. The pork ribs I was saving for my special stew recipe, the one my mother taught me before she passed. All of it had vanished. I closed the refrigerator door and opened it again, as if the simple act of closing it would somehow make everything reappear, like a magic trick in reverse. But no, still empty. Just cold air and bare shelves staring back at me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears as I moved to the pantry. I pulled open the door with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The cans of tuna I kept for quick lunches, the dried beans for soup, the rice that should have lasted another month, the olive oil that had cost me $20 on sale, the cookies I allowed myself as a small treat after difficult shifts, the coffee that got me through the mornings. All of it. Gone. I ran to the cabinet where I kept the wines. 6 bottles I had been collecting over the years. Some were gifts from past birthdays, from friends who knew I appreciated a good red. Others I had bought myself during special sales, telling myself I deserved something nice once in a while. I'd been saving them for occasions that deserved celebrating. The cabinet was empty. Only dust marked the outlines where the bottles used to stand, like chalk drawings of ghosts. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, and the kitchen seemed to be spinning around me. I stumbled to the drawer where I kept the specialty items. The Manchego and Gouda cheese that Patty had brought me from her trip, the prosciutto I'd splurged on for the holidays, the fancy crackers I'd been rationing to make them last. Nothing. Not a crumb, not a wrapper. I sank into a kitchen chair, my legs finally giving out. I sat there staring at the empty refrigerator, its door still hanging open, trying to process what I was seeing. A robbery. That was my first thought. Someone had broken in while I slept, but the front door had been locked when I woke up. I always check, and the windows were closed and latched from the inside. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere. Besides, nothing else was missing. The television was still in the living room. My old computer sat on the desk in the corner. The few pieces of jewelry I owned, including my mother's pearl earrings, were still in the box on my dresser. Just the food. Someone had taken all the food. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, my mind racing through possibilities and coming up empty. And then I heard the front door open, the sound of shuffling feet. A familiar heaviness in the footsteps. It was Kevin. He walked into the kitchen with his head down, not looking me in the eye. My son is 32 years old, but in that moment he looked like a 10-year-old boy who had just broken something precious and didn't know how to tell me. His shoulders were slumped, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. His ears were red. I remembered that tell from when he was young. Whenever Kevin did something wrong, his ears would turn red before he even said a word. It was his body's way of confessing before his mouth could figure out how to lie. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to talk to you." I stood up from the chair, feeling the rage start to build in my throat like bile. "Where is the food, Kevin? Where is all the food from the refrigerator?" He stayed quiet, still staring at the floor. His hands were trembling slightly in his pockets. "It was Nicole," he finally mumbled. She took it." "What do you mean she took it?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "Where? Why?" Kevin closed his eyes and took a deep breath, like a man preparing to jump off a cliff. "To her parents' house. She said they don't have money for groceries this week and that you have plenty, that you wouldn't notice a little bit missing." The air left my lungs like I'd been punched. "A little bit?" I interrupted, feeling the tears start to sting my eyes. "Kevin, the refrigerator is empty. Completely empty. They didn't even leave an egg." "I'm sorry, Mom." His voice cracked. I tried to stop her, but she said you didn't need that much. That you live alone and her family is bigger. "I don't live alone," I said, and now the tears were rolling down my cheeks despite my best efforts to stop them. "You two live here, in my house, eating my food, sleeping under my roof." I paused, a horrible realization dawning on me. "And you? You helped her?" The silence that followed was all the answer I needed. My son, my only son. The boy I had raised alone after his father walked out when he was 5 years old. The child I had worked 2 jobs to support, sacrificing everything so he could have a good life. The young man I had welcomed back into my home with his new wife, asking for nothing in return. He had helped his wife empty my refrigerator while I slept exhausted after working all night, while I was killing myself at that nursing home to pay the bills for this house where they lived for free. "She filled 4 bags, Mom," Kevin said in a voice so broken it barely sounded like him. 4 big bags. She took the meats, the cheeses, the wines, everything she could find. I told her it was too much, but she said, "I don't want to hear what she said." I couldn't listen anymore. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, feeling like I was suffocating. The walls seemed to be closing in on me, the air too thick to breathe. I made it to the hallway and leaned against the wall, one hand pressed to my chest, trying to steady myself. Then I did the only thing I could think to do. I walked to my bedroom, went inside, and locked the door behind me. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't be in the same room with him without feeling like everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed, was collapsing around me like a house of cards in a windstorm. I sat on the edge of my bed, and the tears came. Not the quiet, dignified kind of crying, but deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere in my chest I didn't even know existed. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. I wasn't crying over the food. Not really. I was crying because my son had chosen that woman over me, because he had allowed her to steal from me while I slept, because he had participated in my humiliation after I had spent my entire life making sure he never went without. Kevin knocked on the door gently. "Mom, please let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I answered, and I barely recognized my own voice. "Go away. I heard his footsteps move away down the hall, and then the door to his room closed with a soft click. I stayed there sitting on my bed, staring at the wall, trying to understand how I had gotten to this point. How had the sweet boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard become a man who would watch his wife steal from his own mother? How had the child who cried when I cried become someone who could cause me this much pain without even raising his voice? 2 years ago, when Kevin told me he was marrying Nicole, I was genuinely happy. I thought my son had finally found someone to build a life with, someone who would love him the way he deserved to be loved. Nicole Davis was pretty in that polished way young women are these days. Perfect makeup, perfect nails, perfect smile. She was polite at family dinners, laughed at the right moments, and called me Mom, with a voice sweet as honey. I wanted so badly to believe she was the right one for my Kevin. When they came to ask if they could stay in my house while they saved for their own apartment, I didn't hesitate. Of course, I said, hugging them both. Stay as long as you need. Family helps family. I learned later that Nicole had grown up poor, one of 6 children in a household that never had enough. She told me stories about sharing 1 can of soup among 4 kids, about wearing her older sister's worn-out clothes, about the shame of going to school hungry. Part of me felt sorry for her. I understood what it was like to struggle, to worry about where the next meal would come from. But understanding someone's past doesn't excuse their present. The signs were there from the beginning. Small things I brushed aside because I wanted peace in my home. Nicole started using my expensive shampoo without asking. The bottle I budgeted for, the one small luxury I allowed myself, would be half empty after her showers. When I bought a new one and put it in my bathroom, it would migrate to theirs within days. She sprayed my perfume like it was air freshener. She borrowed my hair straightener and never returned it. She went through my $50 night cream in weeks, the same jar that lasted me 4 months because I used it so carefully. When I mentioned it once, gently, trying not to cause conflict, she looked at me like I was the most pathetic person she'd ever met. "Oh, Mom, don't be like that," she said with that smile I was beginning to recognize as fake. "It's just cream. You have so much." So much. I had so much. Working night shifts at 69 years old. My knees screaming every time I climbed stairs. Barely sleeping 5 hours when I was lucky. All so I could have so much for her to help herself to. One day I discovered she had taken my mother's pearl earrings, the ones Mama gave me the week before she died, pressing them into my palm with her frail, trembling hands. "For you, Barbara," she'd whispered. "Something to remember me by." I found them tossed carelessly on Nicole's dresser, tangled among cheap costume jewelry and dried-out mascara tubes. "Chloe, those earrings have huge sentimental value to me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "If you wanted to wear them, you should have asked first." She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum over a toy. "Oh, fine. I won't wear them again. God, you're so sensitive about everything." Kevin never defended me. Not once. Whenever I tried to talk to him about his wife's behavior, he would sigh and tell me I was exaggerating, that Nicole was young and still learning, that I needed to be more understanding. Understanding. I had to be understanding while she disrespected me in my own home, but I swallowed it all. Every slight, every eye roll, every small theft of my dignity. I told myself I was keeping the peace. I told myself that family was more important than pride. I was wrong. I don't know how long I sat in my room that day, long enough for the winter sun to shift across my bedroom wall and begin its descent toward evening, long enough for my tears to dry and leave my face feeling tight and raw. Finally, I made myself get up. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen. My gray hair was a mess. My face was lined with exhaustion and something else. Something that looked like defeat. I opened my nightstand drawer and pulled out the ledger where I tracked my expenses. Flipping through the pages, I found what I was looking for. The last 3 months of household costs. $500 on groceries each month. $150 on utilities. $80 on gas for my car to get to and from the nursing home. $70 on the internet that Nicole used all day to scroll through social media while I was at work. All of it came from my pocket. Every single cent. While Kevin and Nicole contributed nothing, not a dollar toward rent, not a penny toward the electric bill, nothing. "We're saving for our apartment, Mom," Kevin would tell me every time I brought up money. Just a little longer. But they had been living with me for 2 years, and there was no sign of them leaving. No apartment hunting. No serious discussions about moving out. Every time I mentioned deadlines or timelines, Kevin would change the subject or tell me they hadn't saved enough yet. Of course they hadn't saved enough. Nicole bought new clothes every week. Packages arrived at my door 3 or 4 times a month, always for her. Kevin had just upgraded his phone to some fancy model that cost over $1,000. They went out to dinner twice a week, to restaurants I would never dream of going to because I couldn't afford it. But contributing to the house where they lived for free? That was apparently too much to ask. I heard voices in the kitchen, low at first, then rising. I stepped out of my room quietly and walked down the hall. From the shadows, I could see Kevin sitting at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. And there, standing in the doorway like she owned the place, was Nicole. She was holding 2 empty shopping bags and humming a little tune to herself. Humming, like she hadn't done anything wrong. Like coming into my house and taking whatever she wanted was the most normal thing in the world. "Hey babe, I'm back," she said cheerfully. "My parents are so happy with all the food. My mom says you're a saint for thinking of them. She's already making that beef stew I like." My beef, for her mother's stew. Kevin lifted his head. His face was pale, his eyes rimmed with red. "Nicole, we need to talk." "Talk about what?" She set the bags on the counter and started opening cabinet doors. "Oh, is your mom awake? Whatever, I'll just explain. It was for my parents, and that's that. She has her pension. She can buy more." "Nicole, my mom is furious, and she has every right to be." Nicole spun around and rolled her eyes with such exaggeration I could see it from the hallway. "Oh, please. It's not a big deal. It was just some food. Your mom always overreacts about everything. She's so dramatic." Something snapped inside me. I stepped out of the shadows and into the kitchen doorway. Nicole's eyes widened slightly when she saw me, but she recovered quickly, arranging her face into that innocent expression she had perfected over 2 years. "4 bags, I said, and my voice was trembling with a rage I didn't know I was capable of feeling. 4 bags is not just some food, Nicole. It's everything I had in my refrigerator. Everything I bought with my money, working night shifts that are destroying my body." "Oh, Mom, don't be like that." Her voice was syrupy sweet, the way you talk to a child throwing a tantrum. "My parents really needed the food, and you always have such a full fridge. I didn't think you'd mind sharing a little. You didn't ask my permission. You didn't ask if you could take it. You came into my kitchen while I was sleeping after working all night, and you took everything. In what world is that okay?" Nicole shrugged. Actually shrugged, like I was making a fuss over nothing. "Well, it's done now. We can't return it because my parents already started cooking with some of it. I promise I'll ask you first next time." "There isn't going to be a next time," she laughed, a short, dismissive sound that made my blood run cold. "Oh, Mom, don't be so—" And then we all heard it. The sound of a car pulling up outside, a door slamming, then another. I moved to the window and looked out. My heart stopped. It was my father's car, the old blue Chevy he'd had since before I was married, the one he washed every Saturday morning and polished until it gleamed like new. He'd driven it all the way from his small town 3 hours away, but they weren't supposed to arrive until tomorrow. My parents were coming for the weekend, yes, but not until Saturday. Today was Friday. I watched as my father climbed out of the driver's side. William Thompson, 91 years old, but still moving with the straight-backed posture of the soldier he'd once been. Korean War veteran, a man who had seen things most people couldn't imagine and come home with his principles intact. A man who didn't tolerate disrespect or injustice in any form. My mother emerged from the passenger side, her white hair bright in the fading afternoon sun. Dorothy Thompson, 87, with a gentle smile that could comfort anyone and eyes that missed nothing. "Why are they here early?" Kevin asked, his voice thin with panic. I found out later that my mother had tried to call me that morning, worried because I usually answered on the first ring. When I didn't pick up, I had been sleeping the dead sleep of exhaustion. She convinced my father to leave a day early. "I have a feeling," she told him. "Something's wrong." Mothers always know. The front door opened and my father stepped inside first. Even at his age, he filled a room. There was something about him, some quality of presence that made people stand up straighter, made them think twice about whatever they'd been about to do or say. His blue eyes swept the room, taking in everything in seconds. Kevin's guilty posture. Nicole frozen by the counter. My swollen eyes and tear-stained face. "What happened?" he asked. His voice was calm, but there was iron underneath it. A command, not a question. "Nothing, Dad," I tried to say. "Everything's fine, we just—" "Barbara!" He cut me off without raising his voice. "Don't lie to me. I've known you for 69 years. I know when something has hurt you." My mother came in behind him, her arms full of bags. She took one look at my face and dropped everything she was carrying. The bags hit the floor with a soft thud as she rushed to my side. "Sweetheart, what is it? What's wrong?" Her hand found mine, and suddenly I was 5 years old again, running to my mother after falling off my bicycle, needing her to make the pain go away. I looked at Kevin. He was shaking his head slightly, his eyes pleading with me to stay quiet, to keep his secret, to protect him one more time. Nicole had pressed herself against the counter, the empty bags forgotten at her feet. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely afraid. And I realized, in that moment, that I had a choice. I could stay quiet. I could make up some excuse, smooth things over, keep the peace like I always did. I could protect my son from the consequences of what he'd done and go on pretending everything was fine. Or I could tell the truth. I looked at my father, standing there with his soldier's posture and his piercing eyes. I looked at my mother, holding my hand like she had when I was a little girl. And I made my choice. "While I was sleeping after my night shift," I said, my voice stronger than I expected it to be, "Nicole emptied my refrigerator. She took all the food to her parents' house. 4 full bags. The meats, the cheeses, the wines, everything. And Kevin—" I paused, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. Kevin helped her. The silence that followed was deafening. My father stood completely still, but I could see his jaw clench, his hands slowly curling into fists at his sides. My mother's grip on my hand tightened until it almost hurt. Kevin let out a sound like a wounded animal. And Nicole just stared at me with pure hatred in her eyes. My father turned to look at her, and I watched the color drain from her face. When he spoke, his voice was so low and controlled that it was more terrifying than any shout could have been. "She did what?" My father walked to the kitchen without another word. We all followed, drawn in his wake like leaves behind a storm. He opened the refrigerator and stared at the empty interior. The light inside illuminated nothing but bare shelves and clean surfaces. He stood there for a long moment, saying nothing, his back straight as a board. Then he opened the freezer. Empty. The pantry. Empty. The wine cabinet. Empty. Each door he opened was another nail in the coffin of any excuse Nicole might have tried to make. Each empty shelf was evidence of what had been done to his daughter while she slept. When he finally turned around, I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in years. The last time I'd seen that expression, I was 15 years old, and some boys from school had followed me home, saying things no girl should have to hear. My father had stepped out onto the porch, and those boys had run like their lives depended on it. Maybe they had. "My daughter," he said, his voice trembling with controlled rage, "works night shifts at 69 years old. She wakes up with pain in her knees, pain in her back. She barely sleeps. And she does all of this to maintain this house, to put food on this table, to give her son and his wife a roof over their heads." He took a step toward Nicole. She backed up until she hit the counter and couldn't go any further. "And this is how you repay her." It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. "Mr. Thompson, I can explain—" "I don't want explanations." My father's voice cracked like a whip. "I want you to tell me where the food you stole is." "I didn't steal it, "Where is the food?" he shouted. My father, who hadn't raised his voice in 20 years, shouted so loud that the windows seemed to rattle. Nicole flinched like she'd been struck. At my parents' house," she whispered. My father turned to Kevin, who had been standing frozen by the kitchen table, tears streaming down his face. "Kevin, take the keys to my car. You are going to drive to your wife's parents' house right now, and you are going to bring back every last grain of rice they took from here. Do you understand me?" "Grandpa, some of it. My parents already cooked with some of it." Nicole tried to explain, her voice small and frightened. Then they can give you the money to replace it. I don't care how, but my daughter is going to have her food back. My father pulled out his wallet and handed several bills to Kevin. His hands were steady, but I could see the vein pulsing in his temple. And if what they return isn't enough, you use this to buy everything that's missing. The meats, the cheeses, the wines, everything your mother had. Kevin took the money with trembling hands. Yes, Grandpa. My mother, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but there was steel underneath the gentleness. And what about an apology? She looked directly at Nicole. Don't you think you owe Barbara an apology? Nicole opened her mouth, and I hoped maybe, that she would finally show some remorse, that she would realize what she had done and feel genuine shame. But what came out was nothing close to an apology. This is ridiculous, Nicole said, and there was a hard edge to her voice now. The mask was slipping. It was just food. I can buy more, and that's it. I don't understand why everyone is making such a huge deal out of this. The silence that followed was worse than any explosion could have been. My father closed his eyes. I watched him take a deep breath, watched his hands clench and unclench at his sides. When he opened his eyes again, something had shifted. He had made a decision. Your wife, he said to Kevin, his voice terrifyingly calm, has just demonstrated that she doesn't have an ounce of shame or respect. You are going to get that food now. And when you come back, you are going to pack your things, yours and hers, and you are going to leave this house. Kevin went white. Grandpa, you can't. This isn't my house. It's your mother's. My father stepped closer to Kevin until they were face to face. But I can tell you this. If it were my decision, you would already be on the street. He turned to me and his expression softened just slightly. Barbara, do you want this woman to continue living in your house? I looked at Nicole, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since she'd joined our family. I saw the arrogance in her posture, even now, the barely concealed contempt in her eyes, the complete and total absence of remorse on her face. 2 years. 2 years of swallowing my pride, of looking the other way, of telling myself that keeping the peace was more important than my own dignity. 2 years of small humiliations that had built up like poison in my system. It ended now. No, I said. My voice was firm despite the tears still wet on my cheeks. I don't want her here anymore. My father turned back to Kevin. The look on my son's face broke my heart. He was torn apart, caught between his grandfather and his wife, between his family and his marriage. You have 2 choices, my father said. You leave with her, or you stay and prove that you still have some dignity left in you. But she is leaving. Tonight. You can't just kick me out. Nicole's voice rose to a shriek. I have rights. I live here. You have no rights. My father didn't even look at her. This house is in Barbara's name. You live here because of her generosity, a generosity you just destroyed. So take your empty bags and get out of this house before I call the police. The police? For what? For theft. Now he did look at her, and Nicole actually took a step back. You entered this house and took property that wasn't yours without permission. That's called stealing. I may be 91 years old, but I still know how to read the law. Nicole spun toward Kevin, desperation written all over her face. Are you going to let him talk to me like that? Are you just going to stand there while he kicks me out? Kevin was frozen. I watched him look from the floor to his wife, to me, to his grandfather. I could see the battle playing out on his face. The part of him that knew this was all his fault, that he had allowed and participated in the humiliation of his own mother, fighting against the part of him that didn't want to lose his wife. Kevin, I said softly, I need you to make a decision, and I need you to make it now. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw my little boy again. The child who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The boy who made me a card every Mother's Day with crayon drawings of the 2 of us holding hands. The young man who had hugged me so tight when he graduated high school and whispered, I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. Where had that boy gone? Mom, I love you, Kevin said, his voice cracking. I've always loved you. But Nicole is my wife. I can't just leave her. Something inside me shattered. Quietly. Completely. Then pack your things, I heard myself say. The words came out flat, emotionless, as if someone else was speaking them. Both of you, and get out of my house. Nicole opened her mouth to protest again, but my father took one step toward her, and she immediately fell silent. Kevin, his shoulders slumped and his face streaked with tears, turned and walked toward their bedroom. Nicole followed him, but not before shooting me a look of pure, undisguised hatred. I sat down on the sofa feeling completely hollow. My mother sat next to me and put her arm around my shoulders. My father remained standing in the hallway, watching like a sentinel to make sure they were actually packing. You did the right thing, sweetheart, my mother said softly. It doesn't feel right, I answered, my voice barely a whisper. It feels like I just lost my son. You didn't lose him. He lost himself. She stroked my hair gently, the way she used to when I was small. But maybe this will help him find his way back. We heard them packing, drawers opening and closing, the zip of suitcases, tense, whispered arguments behind the closed door. Before they left, my father stopped them at the door. He went through Nicole's bags, pulling out my bottle of expensive perfume, 2 of my silk scarves, a book I had been reading, and a framed photograph of Kevin as a child. These stay, he said, setting everything on the table. You don't take anything that isn't yours. Kevin paused at the threshold, one suitcase in each hand. He turned and looked at me one last time. I love you, Mom, he said. I love you too, I replied, because it was the truth. Loving him and being disappointed in him weren't mutually exclusive. But that doesn't change what happened. He nodded once, then walked out the door. Nicole didn't say goodbye, didn't even look back. I watched from the window as they loaded into a taxi, watched as the car pulled away from the curb and disappeared around the corner, watched until there was nothing left to see but an empty street and the fading light of day. Then I let myself cry again. My parents stayed for a week. My father fixed everything in the house that had been broken for months, the dripping faucet, the squeaky door, the window that wouldn't close properly. My mother cooked meals that filled the kitchen with warmth and the comforting smells of my childhood. They didn't let me be alone, not for a minute, and slowly the hollow feeling in my chest began to fill with something else. Not happiness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of peace. I took the week off from work. My supervisor didn't ask questions when I told her it was a family emergency. I think she could hear in my voice that something had broken. I used the time to think, to process, to figure out who I was now that I wasn't Kevin's doormat anymore. I applied for the day supervisor position at the nursing home. It paid a little less than the night shift, but I wouldn't be destroying my body anymore. I wouldn't be coming home at dawn feeling like I'd been beaten with a stick. I could sleep at night like a normal person and wake up with the sun. My boss said yes immediately. We've been hoping you'd apply for months, Barbara. Small steps, but they felt like giant leaps. 3 weeks after Kevin left, I was making dinner when I heard a knock at the door. My heart jumped. I looked through the peephole, and my breath caught in my throat. It was Kevin, but he looked different, thinner, like he hadn't been eating well. Dark circles under his eyes so deep they looked like bruises. His hair was uncombed, his clothes wrinkled. He was holding a bouquet of flowers, white daisies, my favorites, and nothing else. I opened the door slowly. Mom, his voice cracked immediately. Please, can I come in? Just for a few minutes. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to close the door, to protect myself from more hurt. But another part, the part that would always be his mother, couldn't turn him away. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, looking around like he wasn't sure he was allowed to be there. The house looks different, cleaner. It's easier to keep clean with fewer people making messes. He flinched at my words, but he nodded. I deserve that. Where's Nicole? I don't know. He sat down heavily on the sofa, staring at his hands. At her parents' house, probably. We split up, for good, a week ago. I sat down across from him, not touching, not comforting, not yet. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. He looked up at me and I saw tears in his eyes. You were right about her, about everything. He told me what had happened after they left, how he'd started to see all the things he'd been blind to before, the way Nicole talked about me when I wasn't around, mocking my clothes, my job, my pathetic little house. The way she laughed about how easy it was to take things from me. The way she was already planning what else they could get. After we left here, I started going to therapy, he said. Twice a week, I needed to understand how I became that person, how I let someone who made me worse come before someone who always gave me everything. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I'm not here to ask for money, Mom. I'm not here to ask if I can move back in. I'm living in a tiny apartment I can barely afford, working extra shifts to pay my own bills for the first time in my life. He leaned forward, looking at me with more honesty than I'd seen from him in years. I just came to tell you I'm sorry. I'm sorrier than words can express. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the son you deserved all along. I looked at my son, this broken man who had let the worst of himself win, but also the boy he had once been, the person he might still become if he truly chose to change. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Kevin, I said honestly. Not completely, not right now, maybe someday, but not today. You hurt me in a way I didn't know I could be hurt. I know. He nodded, tears falling freely now. And I accept that. Can I call you sometimes? Can I tell you how I'm doing? You don't have to answer. You don't have to say anything. Just let me try to rebuild this, even if it's just a little at a time. I was quiet for a long moment. Then I nodded. You can call, but Kevin, if you let me down again, there won't be another chance. I understand. He stood up to leave. At the door, he turned back one more time. I love you, Mom, and I'm going to prove I deserve your love back. After he left, I sat alone with the white daisies in my hands. He had remembered my favorites. That small thing meant something. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But maybe it was a start. That evening, there was another knock at my door. This time it was James Mitchell, my neighbor from down the hall. A kind man, 72 years old, a retired high school teacher. His wife had passed 3 years ago, and since then he'd been quietly, gently making his presence known. A wave in the hallway. A magazine he thought I might like left at my door. Flowers from his little balcony garden. I made beef stew, he said with a shy smile. Way too much for one person. Would you like to share? I could bring it over here, or, if you'd like, you could come to my place. I have a little balcony. We could eat and watch the sunset. I looked at this kind man, this neighbor who barely knew me but had shown me more consideration in a few weeks than some people had in years. I'd like that, I said. Give me 5 minutes to change. We ate on his balcony as the sun went down, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. We talked about simple things and deep things, about loss and starting over, about loneliness and the unexpected gift of companionship. When the last light faded from the sky, I realized I was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in longer than I could remember. I am 69 years old. I spent 2 years letting people take advantage of my love, my generosity, my desperate need to keep my family together. I swallowed my pride so many times I forgot what it tasted like. I sacrificed my dignity on the altar of keeping the peace. But I learned something important in that empty kitchen, staring at those bare refrigerator shelves. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's self-love. And sometimes, losing someone is the only way to find yourself. The refrigerator is full again now. My parents made sure of that before they left, and I've kept it stocked ever since. There's good cheese in the drawer, and wine in the cabinet, and fresh vegetables in the crisper. But more than that, my life is full again. Full of possibility. Full of hope. Full of the quiet understanding that I am worth protecting, worth respecting, worth loving. And that I don't have to earn those things by giving away pieces of myself. Kevin calls every Sunday now. Sometimes we talk for an hour. Sometimes just for a few minutes. He's working hard, he tells me. Going to therapy. Learning to be better. I don't know if he'll get there. I don't know if we'll ever have the relationship we once had. But I know this. Whatever happens, I will never again be the woman who wakes up to an empty refrigerator and an emptier heart. I am 69 years old, and I am finally putting myself first. And it feels like freedom,